Greetings and welcome to the 52nd episode of Morrowind Modding Showcases, and as always, I'm your host, Elf Guy, and today we have another 13 mods for your viewing pleasure, and this time around we do have a bit of an odd theme, in that our theme this week is actually Modathon mods. All the mods in the showcase are mods that were submitted for the 2015 and 2016 Morrowind Modding Modding competitions. Most of them haven't been showcased before, though we've shown a few of these in past videos. In particular, a few of these were showcased in the independent showcase videos from May and June. And in any event, you can find the download links for all the mods shown in this video down in the video description below. So let's get started with our popular mod of the week, which this week is Scamp Replacer by Peterbit and Firim. And this was one of our winning mods of the month back in our 2016 May Modathon, coming in second place, and as you might expect from the title, and the previous replacer mods created by Peterbit and Firim, this is a replacer for the models, textures, and animations of the scamps found in Morrowind. And as you can see here, these are some truly highly detailed models. You can make out a lot of the muscles, veins, teeth, claws, hair, and much more with these new models. They're without doubt the highest quality replacers available for these lower minions of the Daedric realms. And it's certainly easy to see why they won second place in our last modding competition. And something else to point out here, these replacers take advantage of the new physically based rendering techniques of the latest version of the Morrowind Graphics Extender XE. And truth be told, I'm not sure if I've got everything set up correctly here or not. As you guys probably know by now, I don't exactly have the best eye for graphical detail, and the rendering requires, toggling the lighting a bit here, but, regardless, you can certainly see the high quality of these models in just about any lighting setting. And something I just noticed really is you can, practically make out individual ribs of each, scamp's rib cage, which is, well, kind of interesting, or, somewhat disturbing, either way. And also included in this package is a unique replacer for Creeper in Caldera. He basically looks like a normal scamp, but this model also includes a few earrings and other details to give him a slightly more unique appearance than what you might find in vanilla Morrowind. And again, the amount of detailing with these models is just, staggering. You can really see a lot, just sort of zooming up close to the Creeper here. And I believe in addition to PBR support, this replacer also comes with Open Morrowind support, which I've been instructed to pronounce as OpenMW. I know some people are a bit touchy about that, and this basically makes it future-proof. For our house mod week this week, we have Vivek St. Dallin Shelter by Tizzo, and this is actually a pretty small house mod that remodels the St. Dallin North 2 house into a proper player home, but again, it's on the small side, and you'll find in the main chamber a small dining room table, a couple of bookshelves for, displaying items and the like, a small study, and a few containers for storing items, and there's also a teleport ring that you can use to teleport back to your apartment at any time. Now, one of the cool features of this house mod, which is something you'll find in pretty much every Tizzo-made house mod, is that it comes with a wide variety of sorters, including an ingredient sorter, which can sort all of your ingredients into one container, as well as 2 potion sorters that'll, sort any potions that you're carrying into 2 different alphabetically based chests. And one of the really useful features here is that you can sort your ingredients by magical effect. So, like, say you just want alchemical ingredients with restoration properties, because you want to, make some restoration potions. Well, with these sorters, you can automatically sort those ingredients into your inventory, which is quite convenient. And there's also a practice locking container for leveling up your security skill as well. And there's also a small bedroom here, which, doesn't have much, just a bed and a couple of containers, but it's enough to call home. This week's gameplay mod of the week is Inventory Control by SV Engineer 99, and this is actually a mod that we've, already kind of covered back in May or June during our independent showcase videos for the random drawing winners, but I thought we'd, cover it again here, since there's not a whole lot of gameplay-specific mods to fit in this category, or at least not ones that are easy to showcase in any event. And Inventory Control is basically a gameplay balancing and immersion mod that adds time limits to certain actions, like for example eating ingredients, or drinking potions, or booze, or what have you. Now you have to wait for a cooldown to finish before you can, eat something else or drink another potion. About 1 to 2 seconds on average for ingredients and up to 6 seconds for potions. And this was, kind of one of the major balancing problems with vanilla Morrowind, because you could, take 100 potions all at once and just have the magic effects, build up on one another, and 100 bottles of Flynn, and you're basically invincible with a massive amount of strength. And inventory control, makes this, somewhat harder to do now. Likewise, you can no longer equip armor and clothing right in the middle of battle. As I mentioned before, that was, always a little silly. I mean, what are your foes going to do? Just politely sit back and, wait while you change breastplates? That's just, that's not going to happen in real combat. Though you can, change some armor pieces like shields and all that still, but, by the time that you equip them, the town guards may have already, come to your aid and the battle's over. And you can still change weapons in the middle of battle, of course, but it does cause a 1 to 2 second delay, during which time you're vulnerable and, you can't attack, and likewise, drinking a potion in the middle of a battle also leaves you vulnerable for a few seconds until you finish drinking it. As you can't really perform another action until you're done. And something that's worth pointing out here, you can set how many of these limitations occur via in-game script. So if you only want the cooldowns to affect ingredients, drinks, and magical items, you can do that. Or if you want the armor limitations as well, you can also, just change that in-game on the fly. It is a bit more time consuming, but it does add an extra layer of challenge and immersion to Morrowind, and it might be worth checking out if you're into that. Next up we have our Dungeon Mod of the Week, which this week is Cave of Wonders by Lady Phoenix Firerose. And this mod adds a massive new underground dungeon to the Westgas region with several massive chambers, such as, this one here. And it's basically a dark but scenic underground forest of massive trees, glowing crystals, blue mushrooms, the occasional hot spring, and, scenic waterfalls. And this is an extremely dark place though, and you'll probably need to, take with you at least a half dozen torches, or probably more, just to find your way around. And likewise, it is also filled to the brink with deadly creatures like Spriggans and Storm Atronachs that'll put up, a pretty difficult fight. And there is a fair amount of loot here though. It mostly comes in the form of new mushroom ingredients that are worth about 500 gold apiece, and also have a useful divine intervention property, which, could come in handy since, as already stated, these are, some truly dark caverns, and it's entirely possible to just, get lost down here, and ideally, you could hopefully, make some sort of divine intervention potion for a quick and easy way out if it comes to that. Either way, 500 gold apiece certainly makes up for the difficult fights you'll encounter, since Spriggans and Storm Atronachs aren't exactly the easiest foes to face in battle. And speaking of, you can see a few of them here, and there's a lot of them in these large open caverns. And really, much of the Cave of Wonders is just sort of an endless battle. After you finish off one set of opponents, it's right off to the next set, where the action, rarely lets up, keeping you on your toes in this otherwise scenic environment. And in addition to the main cavern, there's also side caverns of fire and ice, each one of a, sort of obvious theme. And we're looking at the Caves of Fire here, and, these are kind of special caverns because you need to find some unique gear to protect you from the elements in the Caverns of Fire and Ice, otherwise you take a lot of fire and environmental ice damage. Not to mention, there's also hordes of flame and frost atronachs that, you'll have to fight through, and this is one pretty large dungeon that'll require a fairly high level character to get through. For our items of the week this week, we have Bucklers in Morrowind by Pikachu no TM. And this is a pretty self-explanatory mod. Like the name suggests, this adds a variety of bucklers to Morrowind for you to find, buy, and equip as shields on your character. They're basically smaller versions of many of the normal shields that you see in Morrowind, like an iron shield or a glass shield, and so on and so forth. There's, I believe, about 10 or more different kinds of bucklers for you to buy, and they're naturally a low-weight solution to a shield, though obviously they probably won't protect you quite as much. Likewise, they're mostly light and medium armor based, and there may be one or two that qualify as heavy armor, but mostly they fall into the other two categories, so they're particularly handy for thieves, spellwright, acrobats, and other quick fighter type classes. And there's even a few all-new bucklers that aren't based on existing armor sets, such as a few different kinds of wooden bucklers that you can find out in the world, which adds a nice bit of variety. And there's even a few artifact bucklers, like this one here, that includes some pretty neat enchantments. And these are hidden around Vardenfell for you to find, and keep in mind there's a few different versions of this mod available, so you can customize how these bucklers show up. Like there's a version for leveled lists, so you can find these bucklers out in the wilderness in crates and barrels, and a version that hand places bucklers in different areas. There's just a variety of different options for you to choose from. This week's quest mod of the week is The Mysterious Hunter by Enclave Killer 1, and this mod starts out when you talk to an Imperial Legion commander in Cedar. He tells you about a mysterious abandoned shack on the edge of town that they've been, trying to collect taxes on, and he asks you to investigate the matter. And this is a pretty normal looking shack on the outside that matches with just about any other shack that you see out in the swampy lands of Cedar, at least on the outside. But once you head on inside, you may find more than what outward appearances would suggest. And immediately inside the shack, everything still looks, fairly normal, aside from the skull, I guess, and you'll find a note left by a mysterious author offering this shack as a temporary home, so long as you ignore the very obvious trapdoor in the floor, which any adventurer with this salt is definitely going to get, just a little bit curious about. And of course, once you go through the trapdoor, it turns out to, actually be a trap. I mean, who saw that coming? And you'll find yourself stuck in a large underground dungeon that you'll have to fight through in order to escape, the keys to the door presumably being held by someone in these dark corridors. And as you'll soon discover, these caverns are a lair for vampires and the undead, and I should probably mention that this questline actually has two sides to it, a vampire side if you're a vampire and a hunter side if you're a normal adventurer. So the quests that you get to experience may be, different depending on your character, which is a pretty cool feature of this mod, and one you don't really see that often in quest mods. You also find a ton of notes, journals, and other documents throughout the dungeon, and these are all, fairly well written and provide a bit of background information to the place and help build the dungeon's atmosphere a bit. In any event, these caverns are pretty compact and close-quartered in some areas, with claustrophobic tunnels with narrow passageways, and larger caverns that open up a bit more. And all of this is, nicely detailed with lots of moss, mushrooms, and some really nice ambient light settings. And the dungeon here is, of course, fairly large, and I'm trying not to spoil too much here. I'm leaving most of the dungeon unshowcased, and we're not going to be featuring the vampire side of the questline, so you just have to, check that all out for yourself. But this is definitely a really unique and cool looking mod that I'd highly recommend checking out. Next up we have our Landmass Mod of the week, which this week is The Isle of the Dead by Transmaster. And this was actually released during the 2015 Modathon a Month competition, and it was one of the random drawing winners for the first week of that competition, but I don't believe we've ever, properly showcased it until now. Basically, The Isle of the Dead is a new modest-sized landmass just west of Solstein that essentially acts like, one big exterior-based dungeon for you to fight through. Despite the whole undead thing and, kind of being a big dungeon, this is actually a really scenic island to visit. I absolutely love the sort of landscape design here, which is a sort of ashlands-like terrain, but with massive red crystals dotting the landscape, which I believe are actually, from Kiev's Dark Telvanni Modders Resource Package. And you also have a lot of these, dramatic massive boulders, Daedric ruins, and the occasional bit of lava. And even though it's a kind of hellish landscape, it's just a surprisingly beautiful place, especially during the evening hours here. And the island itself isn't, huge or anything, and it doesn't have any interiors. This is a purely exterior-based environment for you to fight through and sort of explore. And I'd say there's about an hour's worth of content here in total, including, several battles with artifacts to discover. And, one thing that's worth pointing out here is that this mod was built with On the Rocks in mind, so you'll probably need to have that installed for everything to look as it's supposed to. It's a minor compatibility concern. And, as I keep mentioning, this island is basically one big dungeon. That means you'll be fighting through waves and waves of undead as you traverse and explore this island searching for loot. And most of these opponents are of a, fairly middling level. Most players of about level 10 to 12 should be fine here, though you may often have to, fight through several opponents at once. And, the loot may be a tad bit overpowered, I don't know. It does include the legendary Wing of Bats, but it's a fun dungeon romp and, certainly a beautiful landmass to explore nonetheless. For our NPC Mod of the Week this week, we have Apothecary's Demise by Matthew the Bagel. And a bit of a confession here, this is actually a mod that we've, again, already covered back in June for the independent showcase videos for the random drawing winners. And it's also a bit of a stretch to really call this an NPC mod, since, this is really more of a quest mod, if anything, and this is another sort of difficult category to fill because the only real NPC mod released for the Modathons, I'm actually, planning to showcase in a different episode at a later date. But in any event, you'll find a small apothecary's cottage in this mod in the Ascadian Isles region, and inside you'll find a dead apothecary, presumably he was murdered by someone. And aside from the body, it's a fairly nice looking cottage with a foreboding warning on the floor about the cellar, a small magical lab with lots of clutter, and a journal from the previous owner mentioning a sister in Saran. It should also be pointed out that Apothecary's Demise is, primarily a quest mod really, but it can also count as a house mod since it does come equipped with a teleport ring and house is free for the taking after the quest is finished. And, while fairly small on the surface, the house does have a number of sub-levels, including a cellar with some questionable reading material that may give a hint about what this apothecary was really doing all the way out here in the wilderness. And if the books leave any room for doubt, the ghosts pretty much confirm the sort of undead connections that this place has. And anyway, you'll meet the sister in Saran, who'll give you a series of short quests involving, finding out what happened to her brother, leading you to uncover the mystery gradually. And of course, this naturally involves dungeon delving with a fairly decent-sized tomb that's full of necromancers and the undead, which is, also fairly cluttered and decorated, and which also includes a lot of flavor documents, which, as you guys know, is something I always, personally enjoy finding in dungeons. It just gives an extra layer of immersion and storytelling and all that. And there are a few tough fights here, and you'll probably want to be around at least, level 12 to 15 before going into the final dungeon. Now, you might be able to do it earlier, it all depends, of course. But anyway, this is a rather lovely looking set of tombs here that have been, converted into a set of, sort of living quarters for these necromancers, but, which could also be a sort of extension of a player home for yourself if you so desire, and once the quest is finished and all the necromancers are dead. And this is just a fun quest mod to check out and play for yourself. This week's New Meshes and Textures mod of the week is Better Spriggans by Sigmund, and I know, this is another mod that we've already, technically covered. I was originally planning to, cover another mod in this time slot, but due to the technical difficulties, that's been pushed back until episode 53. But anyway, as I've mentioned before in our last independent showcase of this mod, this is a complete replacer for the Spriggans of Solstein, giving them updated models and textures that includes a few particle effects with green glowing veins and fireflies that, hover around them. And, personally, I really like this replacer. It really gives the Spriggans a sort of woodsy vibe with the deep green textures that I feel, appropriately matches the concept of woodland spirits that Spriggans, kind of represent. And plus, they look really cool in the evening to nighttime hours with their glowing veins and fireflies, making them, easy to spot from a distance, but also, just making for a cool glow in general that I feel is, kind of atmospheric. Next up, we have our Modest Resource Mod of the Week, and this week we have Memories of Morrowind by Illy. And as far as I know, there's only ever been, one pure Modest Resource mod released for the Modathons, so this is a fairly obvious choice for this category. But even so, Memories of Morrowind is a pretty cool resource that adds a variety of new wall screens to the game that takes advantage of a lot of the custom art that Bethesda made for Morrowind during its development. You can see a few of these wall screens here in some of my own modded interiors, and they add a nice touch to Dunmiri style interiors in particular, providing a scenic decoration piece that also helps to divide off various rooms and storage areas. And there's also a plugin file included in this resource that places a few of these wall screens in game, and you can typically find them in quest important locations like the Hlaalu Council Chambers in Balmora or the Tavern in Voss, and they typically have some art of those cities on them, and it's just a really nice resource to check out. For our underrated mod of the week this week, we have Sweet Rest, the Vivek Tea Room by Rachel. And this mod adds a new sort of tavern and drinking chambers to the Vivek Foreign Quartered Wasteworks. And this is a fairly nice looking place to go to relax in between adventures. It's a fairly cozy looking, and the proprietor of course serves tea that you can buy, as well as a modest selection of booze. And most of this establishment is of course dedicated to seating and dining for patrons. Most of them are regulars who don't like talking to outsiders, but a few of them do have some unique dialogue. including a couple of small miscellaneous quests that you can do. Nothing too difficult, mostly just, finding lost items and the like. And this is a fairly cozy and atmospheric place to visit. And personally, I think it fits in fairly well with the Dunmiri culture. I mean, I could totally see Dunmer sitting down to enjoy some tea and the like. And aside from the quests and the tea, there's not really a whole lot to do here, but it does, provide a nice place to visit with a unique style and charm to it, even if, some of the patrons can be a bit rude at times. And it's worth checking out if you like that sort of thing. This week's Blast from the Past mod of the week is Deep Scorn by Isthredify. And, we already showcased this mod as one of the winning mods of the 2015 Modathon month, coming in second place, but that was, a year ago, which is enough to qualify for a Blast from the Past in terms of the Modathon, since, obviously, we've only been doing these for a couple of years now. But in any event, with this mod, you'll discover an abandoned set of Imperial-style rooms and caverns near Wolverine Hall inside of Mora. And there's not a whole lot here originally, just a corpse of the previous owner with a journal that provides a bit of a background story, as well as, the name of someone who can finish this abode, and you can see that NPC here, and he'll sell you finishings for each individual room, and, these vary in price from about 2,000 to 5,000 gold. And it's basically a lot like the vanilla houses that you can buy in Oblivion. Just buy the finishings for each room as you can afford them, like the alchemy lab or the smithy shop, and eventually, should you save up enough gold, you can finish the entire place. And once fully finished, the central area here actually becomes an alchemical garden with various plants growing that can provide an assortment of alchemical ingredients for making various poisons. And this house is actually really supposed to be used by assassins, whether the Modathon or the Dark Brotherhood. And there's even a shrine room where you can, dedicate your shrine to Sithis or Mephala. And there's also a smithy shop area with some, nice decorations and a few armor display mannequins. And it should be mentioned that this mod is actually based off of the Vile Lair DLC from Oblivion, in case you were wondering why it looks, vaguely familiar. And a really cool feature here is that this house does come with a training cavern down below with animated practice dummies that fall apart when you hit them, as well as archery targets that actually, fall back when you shoot them, which is just a really neat feature that I really enjoy. Naturally, there's an alchemical lab as well, as any assassin with this sort needs to have, some sort of place for making poisons. And you'll find labeled ingredient containers here with this set of drawers, as well as a stationary alchemical stand for making potions, though you'll actually need to add alchemical apparatuses to the container here before you can, automatically use them. And of course, there's alchemical sorters as well, and you can, use these scales and weights to sort ingredients from Vanilla Morrowind, as well as Mournhold and Solstheim. And you also find a small study here, and the wall hangings actually change when you switch your shrine from Mephala to Sithis, which is, a cool little feature. And there's also a number of Modathon and Dark Brotherhood related books down here as well. And downstairs there's a bedroom, and this is really just a sort of ideal home for an assassin or a thief or other, darkly inclined character, and it's definitely worth checking out. Finally, for our bonus mod of the week this week, we have Charging Equipment by Daedra Cat. And basically what this mod does is it adds a bunch of hidden containers around the Better Coast region outside of Sudanine, with some, basic equipment and items in them that may prove useful for newer players. And one of the really cool things about these containers is that they all come with a small bit of a sort of background story. Like, one might be a chest carried by a wizard that went down with his ship at sea, or another might be of a lost adventurer who died in a tomb. And this is a perfectly balanced and immersive mod that fits in, quite well for Vanilla Morrowind, since as most people probably know, Bethesda hid a lot of loot in the Sudanine area to help out starting players that took the time to fully explore and look around the terrain, especially the tree stumps. So this kind of fits in perfectly with all that, and it rewards observant players while also, helping them as they're just starting out in the game, and I definitely recommend checking it out. And that wraps up this week's episode of Morrowind Modding Showcases. Tune in next time for another 13 mods for your viewing pleasure. And of course, if you have any particular suggestions for mods you'd like to see, do please post them below. And anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.